It's Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I'm so excited. One of my favorite authors for middle grade readers, it's here. It's Newberry Award-winning author Linda Sue Park with her first book in a fantasy trilogy. It's called Wing and Claw, Forest of Wonders. Well, Linda Sue, welcome back to Naperville and Anderson's.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
Oh, we are so excited to have you here. And you're here for something that's kind of new for you, a middle grade fantasy, but one that's going to be a trilogy. That is so cool. So the book's only been out literally, what, just a few days
Yes,
now?
that's
Came
right.
out this past Tuesday. So I know there's been those pre-readers, but you've done a few school events. So what are you hearing from those who have had a chance to read the book so far?
Fantasy readers are a special breed, and I have tremendous respect for them. I love fantasy myself. I really, really wanted to, sort of do right by them.
Sure.
So today I was at a school that where there were young readers who had finished the book, the first that I've met, and they were rating it very highly. So I'm really delighted.
Well, it's so great because we always consider the mother of all reviews the Star Kirkus review, and you've got a Star Kirkus on this, so that's got to feel pretty good. But you've won so many awards over the years for all of your books. So you went to those schools today, but you've done many school events over the years. What is it that's special about when you present at schools and like today? And I know you talk a lot about writing with the kids, but what was special about those schools today, besides the ones who had read that, but anything that stood out for you?
I just feel so fortunate that what I ended up was writing books for young people, because you never again love a book the way you do when you're a child. And our fans, the fans that we have, people who write for young people, I'm an adult reader myself, and I love my adult authors and so forth, but our fans are so passionate, and they they love our books. They read them 10 and 15 and 20 times, and so when you go into a school, you get to meet kids like that, and it's just so inspiring. Even after I'm nearly 20 years in this business, it's just such a lift to think, they really are reading them, and they're really loving them, and it's very inspirational.
Well, and I think what's so, and you write in this sort of this middle grade sort of age level, but when you've got kids as readers and you've captured them, you know that you've got readers for life.
I hope so. I
think for you, definitely.
Yeah.
So you've written so much historical fiction, and knowing that this is your first trilogy and it's a fantasy, what was the writing process like for you and different than those picture books and those historical fictions?
Well, actually, I was relieved that there was a lot of overlap with historical fiction, because in both cases you were having to build a world, in one case that never existed, and another that doesn't exist anymore. So it was still a ton of research for me, and not just making it up out of my head. I wanted it to seem a very real world. So there was research to write a fantasy book, as well as there is research to do historical fiction.
No, it was one of my questions, because the research for this, because the main character, he's an apothecary. So did you do some research about that sort of thing, about any alchemy or apothecaries, or what that might entail?
Absolutely. That was so much fun for me, because one of my interests is cross-cultural and multicultural and diverse books, and so it turns out that, of course, throughout the millennia of human existence, every culture and society has had apothecary or herbal medicines before the advent of modern science. So because this is a fantasy world, in some ways I can do what I want, and so Rafa's family and his world's apothecary draws on traditions from all over the world, and that was so fun for me.
Oh, I bet. So besides that kind of research, anything else about apothecary, but also, there's so many animals in this character, and the life in this forest, and everything that's going on. Any other research besides just looking up alchemy and apothecaries and all the different kind of herbal kind of things that were used over the centuries?
Tons of animal research.
Oh, okay.
I feel that fantasy, in order to be emotionally resonant, has to be grounded in the real world, right?
Sure.
So, for example, there are talking animals in the book, but this is a wonder. This is an incredible, amazing thing, just as it would be in our world.
Sure.
So I had to research the animals, bats, raccoons, bears, owls, so that I could make them as real as possible. So when they turned out to have magical qualities, that would be a great source of wonder.
Yeah,
So I know a lot more about bats than I used to.
And the bat in this book, what a riot. I mean, and we don't want to give too many spoilers away, but his name is Echo. And he's got quite a sense of humor. So he must have been really fun to write. And we hope that he will be in,
Yes.
without any spoilers.
Yes, no,
in
so
future books.
so fun to write, and he is a major character. So in a trilogy, your major characters stay throughout the books. So you will see more of Echo.
So, Linda, so where did the seed start to grow for this book and your idea to make this into a trilogy? What was happening that this is it? This is the story I want to write.
Well, this kind of might surprise you, but there are many ideas for books and series that are what are called generated in-house. The publisher comes up with the idea and then invites writers that they think would be a good fit to write them. I am fortunate to receive these kinds of proposals often, and I turn most of them down because, as with anything else, you have to feel passionate and inspired by the idea. So when this one came across my email box, I was like, oh, apothecaries. I love to cook. I love to eat. Apothecaries, they did a lot of cooking. There was the animal thing. I love animals. And there was the opportunity, I realized, with a fantasy, which I hadn't written before, to draw from many different cultures.
Yeah.
So that combination, I thought, this one is really staying with me, I'm not just pressing delete and thinking I don't want to, So, and it was the publisher who said, this will be a trilogy. I was very resistant at first. I have not done one before. I said, can I write book one and then we'll decide?
Sure. Yeah.
And they said, no.
Oh.
We want to market this as a trilogy.
Okay.
And so I said, okay. And so it's my first venture into it. And I have to say, I'm having a blast.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, our young hero in this, and Rafa Santana, a talented apothecary who, he's sort of his dad's apprentice. And
That's right.
has a cousin and also an uncle that's sort of involved in this. Where did his character come from? Any composites or his DNA? Where did he come from? Because he is such a great character.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I do draw on almost everyone I know to write my characters. As you said, a composite, drawing something from one person and another. But I always say that the only person whose emotions I can truly know are my own.
Sure.
You're never ever in anyone else's head, no matter how much you'd like to be. So that every character has something of me in them to make them real, including the so-called villains or bad guys. I like to think I'm not a terrible person, but I've done and said things I'm not proud of, and I go to those moments to try to write the characters who are less likable.
Well, he is a great character. But Echo, going back to our talking bat, who has such a great sense of humor, so Rafa finds him in the forest and he's injured, and he uses, and we don't want to give too much away because this is kind of at the beginning,
Yes,
but
right.
a mysterious red vine that he uses to create something to heal him,
Right.
and as a result, not only does he heal the bat ends up having the ability to speak.
Yes.
So we know that something's up and what's happening. So this book has some ethical dilemmas, and I think you put that in a lot of what you write. And creating those types of things. And this is sort of like you can use something to change the world,
Yes.
but like his father warns him, your skill as an apothecary is to heal, not to use your skill to benefit yourself.
Yes, that's right.
So there are these dilemmas within their book, and there's many more about what's happening in the forest, what's going to happen to the animals, but also we have an evil uncle and those types of things, and without too many spoilers. But putting those dilemmas in your books, how does it help story, and how does it gives it more meat, it has more weight to it, but how does it take the story along? Because it's great fodder for
Thank
story
you.
for that kind of battle.
This is why, although I enjoy writing for all ages, from tinies to adults, I feel middle grade is kind of the golden age of story. Because before middle grade, the world is a little bit more black and white, right and wrong. This is do this, don't do this, listen to mom, this. Middle grade is where young readers start to realize that the world has a lot more shades of gray.
Right.
And they're figuring this out. And this remains a puzzle to me to this day.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, when things are not black and white, when things are shading into gray, how do you decide? What are, you know, how do you know what to do? What informs the choices that you make? And middle grade, you know, smack dab in the middle, and plus moving towards the upper end of middle grade, I think this is where these questions get explored, which is why I love them so much, and that they are in, I hope, all of my middle grade books.
Right. And right now, I think there's such a richness of middle grade books out right now. And that's, right now, we've been talking about it a lot lately amongst ourselves, thinking that there are just so many wonderful middle grade books out there that we love to read as adults,
Absolutely.
obviously. You know? So world building, you got to build a world in this. Did you sit down, and this is what I always, you know, ask anyone who writes science fiction or fantasy, do you sit down and write out the rules? Or do you build the world? Does it kind of grow organically as you're writing the story?
There's two answers to that. The world itself, I think, I did some, whatever you want to call, pre-thinking about it before I wrote, and then it grew organically out of the story. But the magic, I really wanted it to have rules. Because I've read wonderful fantasies that sometimes disappoint me a little because the magic is not consistent. And you're like, well, wait a second, if they have that power, they've had it for 4 chapters, why don't they just do X, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I don't want that kind of inconsistency in the world that I'm making. And so right from the start, I said, if I'm going to write this series, there's going to be one kind of magic. And it is that the plants, some of the plants will have magical properties that affect animals only. No magic for humans. None of the humans are magic. So actually the editor thought about that and said, we had kind of envisioned a magical world. And I'm like, that's fine. I could see the story going that way, but then you get someone else, because this magic I will control and make completely consistent.
Right.
And so that was a rule right from the start.
Well, I mean, you know, and kids, they're so sharp when they're reading things. They'll catch anything
They
that's
sure will.
inconsistent.
That is right.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
They'll keep you honest on
That's
this stuff.
right.
So knowing that this is a trilogy, and I always ask this for people who write in trilogies or even a duology or whatever you're writing, did you have a complete story arc? And, you know, we always talk about trilogies, worrying about that book in the middle.
Yes.
You know, and that's a challenge, because some people think, oh, this is just the piece till I can get to the last book. So how did you create that outline? And when you do, if you do outline, are you still letting the story take you where it goes and surprise you as much as it surprises the reader?
Well, for the trilogy, I had 3 gigantic chunks. In other words, no small details, no. So book 1 obviously is discovery. You know, book 2 is antidote. Because this magical property causes problems that Rafa never anticipated. And book 3, generally speaking, is battle. All right, so I have these 3 big chunks, and then I do want to be able to let the story take me where it wants to go. So I do quite a thorough and detailed outline, right, with the caveat that in the writing, I might diverge a little bit, but the outline, I always think of it as like a map. I know where I'm going. I may go off on a side street a little bit, but I'm headed in the same direction. I'm not going completely astray.
Yeah. You know, there was another side character that I absolutely loved, was Kuma Oriole, and Rafa meets her in the city when he goes to the city. Tell us a little bit about her, because I just loved her character.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do like when I can have both male and female characters in my stories. Rafa is the main character, and the story is from his point of view. But I wanted a very important female character in there as well. And so I have 2 actually, Kuma and Trixin.
Oh, Trixin.
Yes, and they're very different. But so it actually ends up being Rafa and cousin Gareth, 2 boys, and Trixin and Kuma, 2 girls. And that is actually more characters than I usually juggle. But I did have a good time writing them, and it enabled me to, you know, bring in different aspects of story because they are all different characters.
Yeah. So, going back to how you started to be a writer, what is your earliest recollection of thinking, you know, I want to be a writer? I mean, do you remember how old you were? And do you remember what that first thing you wrote that you knew this was the path you wanted to take?
Well, okay, my very first memories that could be associated in that way are of being a reader. I was a reader. I was a devourer of books.
Yeah.
And public library. My father took me to the public library, and I talk a little bit about that in my TED Talk, which
I
I've
watched
fortunate-
it. That
Thank
was
you.
fabulous.
Thank you.
I have a question about that too.
Okay,
So
right.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Big reader.
Yeah.
And the becoming a writer really did feel like an organic extension of that. I was reading so many great stories and poems, and it just seemed kind of natural to want to try to produce something like that myself. So actually, I don't have kind of an aha moment.
Okay.
It just, since I began reading really young and writing quite young, my mother has poems and stories saved from when I was in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So my memories of reading and writing go back so far that there isn't sort of one moment that I remember.
Right.
You know. So.
Well, I know in your TED Talk you mentioned your dad and how he immigrated from Korea and how amazed he was he could go into a library. And when you talk about a library, it's true for all of us. You can go in and grab all these books and you don't have to pay anything, and you can keep them, and then you can bring them back. But tell us about your dad's experience, and that, obviously that rubbed off on you about.
Well, yes. I mean, he did think libraries were a miracle, and he took us faithfully and turned us all into library patrons. I have to say that there was a downside to it. He wouldn't buy me a book. He'd say, put that down. We can get that at the library.
We'll let you do that here.
Yes, that's right. So I have regressed. I still am a huge library patron, but I buy books now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so good.
Yeah.
So your TED Talk, what you talked about in that is a passion for reading, and I don't know any wonderful writer who has not been a voracious reader and is a voracious reader. It's sort of that, you know, a writer's on reading. You know, they are not inseparable.
Right.
You know, they are inseparable. And so tell us a little bit about when you read, what do you look for? And then when you sit down to write, what does it mean to you? Where do those past reading experiences come to life on the page for you when you're a writer?
Well, for me, because I always have been such a reader and continue to do so today, it is kind of a question of quantity. In other words, when I read, I am reading to be entertained. I'm not looking at technique. I'm not looking at character. Yeah, I'm just reading as many books as I can before I die. So that's the goal. But I think it's cumulative and subconscious. You know, my brain is full of words and characters and stories, and it's just all piled up and in there. And so that when I write, I feel like every writer I've ever loved is sort of hovering over my shoulder and helping me out, and just through kind of osmosis, not through a conscious effort to imitate or to imbibe their craft. Just story.
You know, and you mentioned in your TED Talk, and this is something that I say when I talk to teachers or groups of anyone who wants to listen, talking about what reading fiction does for us. It doesn't matter your age, but it builds empathy. And you talk about empathy in your TED Talk, and also about, you know, empathy leads to engagement. Tell us a little bit about that, because it is
Well, actually, that was a surprise for me, because I have always regarded reading as something that can make a huge difference on a personal, individual level, making us feel we're not alone, helping us practice at life, you know, which I also talk about. But my book, A Long Walk to Water, had the startling result of being a community-wide response in many places where people were inspired to donate money to a good cause because of this book. That really surprised me. It was not something that I expected at all, and it was wonderful.
Right.
It continues to be wonderful.
Oh yeah, and A Long Walk to Water, it was on the New York Times bestseller list for like 2 years.
Yeah, it still is. I'm
It's-
glad to
is it
say.
still-
Yes,
it still
it is.
It's just, but that book really does. It's phenomenal, and what it can do. And hearing kids talk about it too is just so brilliant.
Yeah, it's just been wonderful. I have heard so many wonderful responses, not only from young readers, but very gratifyingly from teachers who will say, this is my favorite unit to teach all year. So
Yeah.
that's a great feeling.
Oh, I bet. So knowing that you were you born in Urbana, Illinois?
I was,
You were
yeah,
born in
yeah.
Urbana. How long did you live there? And then you moved up to the Chicago area and grew up here.
Yes.
So then you went to Stanford, and then you had several different positions. So I want to know how all of these informed your life as a writer. So you wrote a publications writer for an oil company, right? And then you also were a food journalist. So there's that love of food you mentioned, right? And also an advertising company. But the one I really loved is that you're an ESL teacher.
Yes.
How cool is that? And you still do that?
No, I don't do
You
that
do it
anymore.
but you did it for a long time.
I did it for many years,
Yeah.
and I loved it as a job. When I look back on it, it was a job I took at the time because I was at the university level. So teaching at the college level is a great job to combine with raising a family because you can have flexible hours, and So I was teaching in the mornings and getting home in time to see my kids home from school. And yet, when I look back on it, I grew up in a family whose native language was not English, and was translating for my parents from an early age,
Yeah.
And being an ESL teacher gave me these incredible antennae for the English language. My students would ask me questions about things that I always took for granted, and I'd have to say, okay, I'll think about that and get back to you. I don't know why we do that, whatever it is.
Sure.
And so it just sort of intensified and magnified the love I already have for words and language, and it's just such a fascinating human thing, the ability to communicate through words. And my students helped me realize that anew every time I taught.
Right. So. Were there any books that you used in particular that with your ESL students that you were very effective and that you were your favorites that you used over and over?
Yes, I used a lot of shorter passages, not full books, because of the length of time that I have had them. And I remember certain passages from a travel writer named Redmond O'Hanlon, who had crazy journeys, and so these were always very arresting. So I used some of that. But more importantly, I think an exercise that I did as an icebreaker became a book for me. So these students would often be very shy and very lost. They would be in their first few, days in America, and I needed to loosen them up and get them to relax. And so I would say, what does a dog say in your country? And it doesn't always say bow wow or woof woof. So in Korea, a dog says mung mung. In Russian, a dog says gav gav. And they would be cracking up after just a few minutes listening to each other say what their dogs say in their countries. And that became a picture book called Mung Mung.
Mung? Yes. I remember that book.
And that was a direct takeaway from that I got from my students.
Right. And you have a new picture book that's just out this week too, called Yak's Yak.
That's right.
The double words, and it's so wonderful. I just want to tell you, I absolutely love that picture book.
Thank you, and it has fantastic illustrations by Jennifer Black Reinhardt that I'm crazy about.
The illustrations are great. Yes. So that is so wonderful. So after winning the Newberry medal for a single shard, and all of the other honors and awards that you won for all of your historical fiction, I always wonder, is it hard to sit down and knowing that you won this medal, to sit down, and is it daunting to think that, do you have it in the back of your mind, or has it never affected you that way when you sat down to write something?
I was worried that it would.
Okay.
And so what I did was I gave the medal to my parents. It's not even in my house. I worried that, walking past it every day might make me feel that. So it's not even, it's on their mantle, and they're very proud of it, which I'm glad about, but it's not even in my house. And so I don't have to sort of think every day, I must live up to this. It's still such a wonder to me. It's been 14 years since a single shard won, but not a week goes by that I don't pinch myself. Really win the Newberry.
So your husband is Irish, right? And a journalist, and you received some advanced degrees. You went to Trinity in Dublin and also in London. And with all of your previous experiences that you've had and everything, what I really want to know is what made you want to sit down in 1997 and start to write a children's book, which ended up being Seesaw Girl. So what was it that took you to writing all these wonderful middle grade novels for kids?
And I was a late starter. I was in my late 30s when I started Seesaw Girl, and so I always want to encourage people that it's never too late to start following your dreams. But it was actually my husband who's my biggest fan and my biggest supporter, and he put it kind of a different way, I suppose, but he said, you're always talking about writing a book someday. I wish you would just quit talking about it and do it. And he made me realize, I don't want to be somebody who just talks about it and never does it. I might never get published, but I want to have finished something. So with that encouragement, I sat down and wrote the manuscript that eventually became Seesaw Girl.
And the rest is history, right? So, knowing that this is the first of a trilogy, what do you hope kids are going to get out of this book? What do you hope they're going to tell you that they got out of Wing and Claw,
Right.
The
Well,
Forest of Wonder?
First and foremost, I hope that they have a good read. I hope that they're entertained and compelled and turn the pages and want to stay up late at night to finish. I mean, that has to be the goal with every book, I think. And then for each reader, the takeaway is going to be different. It's going to be whatever that reader most needs to find in that book. And that's what's so wonderful about reading and why it's interactive, why we like different books, why different people can like the same book for different reasons.
So tell us, what's next for Rafa and his friends moving into book 2 with no spoilers? Can you tell us just a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I told you the different components that went into making this series attractive for me to write. But I still needed one more piece that would make it my own, that would really make me feel passionate about it. Now we're talking about, this is 2.5 years or more ago that I decided I would write this series. And the piece that I put in is that the evil people, the bad guys in this story, what they want to do is to drive out immigrants, okay, which are called afters in this society, people who came after a certain event. That made it mine. That's my family. I did not anticipate that there would be so much political talk about immigrants and immigration in this particular campaign, which is making it feel very timely. But that is the factor that makes it my own, and again brings in some of these ethical dilemmas you were talking about. And you know, what do immigrants contribute to a society? What is the price we all have to pay? You know, those sorts of things. So those issues will come to the fore in books 2 and 3.
Wow. Okay, I finished these interviews with a really quick quiz. So it's lightning round. So think Alex Trebek. He's watching over your shoulder. You got to do them really fast. So they're all book related. Okay. Favorite book when you were a child?
Roosevelt Grady by Louisa Shotwell.
How about something in high school that has still stayed with you?
The Outsiders.
Okay. How about a favorite line from any book?
And we didn't keep score. The very last line of The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie.
Great one. Okay, how about a book that changed your life?
I, Juan de Pareja by Elizabeth Borton de Trevino, another Newberry winner, about the painter Velázquez, whose slave, who helped him grind paints and so forth, eventually became a free man and an artist himself.
Wow. Okay, how about a book that you faked reading? Because we've all done that.
Oh, Moby Dick.
I get that answer a lot. I always find that so interesting. Okay, how about say a book that you have talked about to so many people, that one book that you've been the total evangelist for, you had to tell everybody you have to read this.
Right. Okay. Oh man. Okay. Can I do one children's and one adult?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. We'll take it.
Okay.
We'll take it.
All right. Let's see. Oh, these are so hard. Because there's so many books that I love so much. Okay, for young people, I loved a series when I was young called the All of a Kind Family Books by Sidney Taylor.
Sure.
They made me want to be Jewish and poor. Because that's what the family is about.
Right.
And for adults, let's see. I'm just starting a wonderful series of books by a writer called Ellie Griffiths. They're a mystery series starring a female forensic archaeologist. And archaeology fascinates me. It's historical stuff, you know. So.
Okay, and knowing that we have another Harry Potter story coming out at the end of July, what is your favorite book of the 7, the original 7?
Number 3, Prisoner of Azkaban.
Mine too.
Yes.
Best one. Okay, and how about, do you remember any books that you loved when your kids were young that you loved to curl up and read together?
Oh, Gary Paulson, Harris and Me. Like, laugh so hard that you pee, funny. Yeah.
It is true. That is so true. I think you do in that book. And what are you reading now? You mentioned that series,
yes.
but
I just finished a book called Norwegian by Night by Derek Miller. A very brainy mystery. Awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, 100%. Alex would be so proud of you.
Thank you.
But Linda Sue, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking
Well,
with
thank
me.
you for having me. I'm delighted.
Great conversation with Newberry Award-winning author for children, Linda Sue Park, and she has her first fantasy. It's the first of a trilogy. It's called Wing and Claw, Forest of Wonders. Thanks for joining me on Authors Reveal.